What if I told you that the most terrifying monster in human history was a real man? Not a creature of the night, not a legend. A prince, a general, a ruler who impaled over 80,000 people, then sat down and ate his dinner among the dying. His name was Vlad III, and the story of his life is so brutal, so strange, so impossibly dark, that a Victorian novelist used it as the blueprint for the most iconic vampire ever written. I'm Red, and today we're going deep into the real story of Vlad the Impaler, the man, the myth, the monster, and asking the question history has never fully answered. Was he a hero? Or something far, far worse?
To understand the monster, you have to understand the boy. And the boy's story begins with a betrayal. It's 1442. Wallachia, a small, volatile principality wedged between the Ottoman Empire and the Kingdom of Hungary. It's a place where princes don't die peacefully in bed. They die on blades, on battlefields, or in the dungeons of their rivals. Vlad's father, Vlad II, is trying to walk a political tightrope, maintaining peace with the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II while also keeping his Christian allies happy. It is, to put it gently, an impossible situation. And when Mehmed demands proof of loyalty, Vlad II makes a decision no parent should ever have to make. He hands over his two youngest sons, Vlad, age 11, and Radu, age 7, as hostages to the Ottoman court. Let that sink in. 2 children, given away as political insurance. Vlad and his brother will spend the next 4 years in Ottoman captivity, likely in the fortress of Egrigos in present-day Turkey. They are educated, they are watched, they are kept comfortable, but they are not free. Every day, Vlad knows that if his father steps out of line, he and his brother die. What does that do to a child's mind? What kind of man does that forge? History is about to show us.
While Vlad is a prisoner, the world he knew is being destroyed. In 1447, his father is assassinated, most likely with the involvement of Hungarian regent John Hunyadi, who considers Vlad II too close to the Ottomans. His older brother, Mircea II, is buried alive by political enemies in Târgoviște. Buried alive. Vlad is released by the Ottomans. They actually back him for the Wallachian throne, thinking he'll be a loyal puppet. He sits on the throne briefly in 1448. Then he's immediately chased out by Hunyadi's forces. For years, Vlad is a man without a country. He bounces between courts, learning, watching, waiting. He studies the Ottomans, their tactics, their psychology, their cruelty. He spends time in Moldavia, then eventually makes peace with Hunyadi himself, who, in a remarkable pivot, comes to see Vlad as a useful instrument against the very Ottomans he once allied with. Then, in 1456, John Yanidi dies of plague, and Vlad, sharp, scarred, and furiously patient, seizes his moment. He retakes Wallachia. This time, he intends to keep it. And he immediately makes clear that this reign will be unlike anything Wallachia has ever seen. His first act? He invites the boyars, the Wallachian nobility, to a feast. These are the men whose political scheming had kept Wallachia unstable for decades, the same class that had contributed to his father's murder. At the feast, Vlad asks the older boyars how many princes they have seen rise and fall. Some say 10, some say 20, some say 30 different rulers. Vlad nods. Then, he has them arrested. The older boyars, impaled on the spot. The younger ones, marched for miles until their fine clothes fall apart, then forced to labor on the construction of Poenari Castle, his mountain fortress, built on the sweat and blood of the men who once ruled beside him. Welcome to Vlad's Wallachia.
Now we come to the act that gave Vlad his name, the practice that burned his reputation into history: impalement. It wasn't invented by Vlad. The Ottomans used it. Other rulers used it. but nobody, in European history at least, used it with the scale, the precision, and the theatrical deliberateness that Vlad did. The method was horrifyingly calculated. A sharpened stake, often oiled to prevent immediate death, was inserted from below and angled to emerge from the shoulder or mouth, carefully avoiding the vital organs. The goal was to keep the victim alive and suffering for as long as possible. Hours, sometimes days. And Vlad didn't just execute criminals. He impaled foreign diplomats who refused to remove their hats in his presence. He impaled merchants who cheated their customers. The most chilling account comes from 1462, during the Ottoman campaign against him. Sultan Mehmed II, the man who had just conquered Constantinople, one of the greatest military minds in history, marched his army into Wallachia with a force estimated at 60,000 to 90,000 men. He expected to crush Vlad quickly. Instead, he marched into what became known as the Forest of the Impaled. Vlad had impaled approximately 20,000 Ottoman prisoners and Bulgarian captives in a stretch of land outside Târgoviște. The bodies were arranged on stakes of different heights, a grotesque forest of the dead, some sources say stretching half a mile wide and nearly 2 miles deep. Mehmed II, conqueror of Constantinople, terror of 3 continents, reportedly turned his army around. Not because he feared Vlad's forces, because the psychological impact of what he witnessed was too much even for him. He is recorded as saying he could not take the country from a man who could do such things. That is the power Vlad understood. The power of terror as a weapon. The power of making your enemy afraid to step into your land. Was it monstrous? Absolutely. Did it work? For a time? Absolutely. Here's what most videos won't tell you, because it complicates the story, because it makes Vlad harder to hate. Within Wallachia, Vlad was not universally feared. He was, for significant portions of the population, something resembling a hero. Under Vlad's rule, crime in Wallachia dropped dramatically. One story, possibly legend, possibly true, says that Vlad placed a golden cup on a fountain in the center of the country's capital. Any traveler could drink from it. In all of his reign, no one stole it, because everyone knew what happened to thieves under Vlad the Impaler. Merchants could travel the roads without fear of bandits. The poor had some protection against the nobility who had exploited them for generations. Vlad's brutal justice, horrifying as it was, fell on everyone, noble and peasant alike. That radical equality of cruelty was, perversely, part of his appeal.
Saxon merchants in Transylvania hated him because he impaled those who violated trade agreements. But Wallachian peasants, historically the victims of those merchants, told a different story. German pamphlets of the era, some of the first uses of the newly invented printing press, portrayed Vlad as a demonic sadist. These pamphlets are the reason his reputation was so thoroughly destroyed in Western Europe. But they were written by his enemies, by men whose business interests he had crushed. Romanian national tradition, by contrast, has always maintained a complicated relationship with Vlad. He is not celebrated as a saint, but he is remembered as someone who made Wallachia ungovernable by its enemies, and who paid a price for it.
Let's go back to 1462. Mehmed II's massive army is in Wallachia. Vlad doesn't have the numbers to fight them in open battle, so he doesn't fight in open battle. Instead, he wages history's most terrifying asymmetric war. He burns his own crops. He poisons his own wells. He drives cattle infected with disease toward the Ottoman encampments. He fights a scorched earth campaign that denies Mehmed's army any food or comfort. And then, on the night of June 16th, 1462, Vlad attempts something almost insane in its audacity. He leads a night raid directly into the Ottoman camp. His goal? Kill Mehmed II personally. He comes extraordinarily close.
His cavalry tears through the camp in the darkness, scattering thousands of soldiers. Mehmed survives, reportedly only because Vlad's men attacked the tents of his viziers by mistake.
But here's the cruel twist of history. While Vlad is fighting the Ottomans, his own brother, Radu, remember the little boy handed over as a hostage, has become a willing ally of the Ottomans. He even becomes a favorite of Sultan Mehmed. And now, Radu leads Ottoman-backed forces to undermine his own brother. The boyars, sensing weakness, defect to Radu. Vlad is forced to flee. He seeks help from the Hungarian king Matthias Corvinus, and instead is thrown in prison, likely on manufactured charges, possibly to prevent diplomatic complications with the Ottomans. He sits in Hungarian captivity for roughly 12 years. Vlad III, the man who turned back an Ottoman army with psychological terror, reduced to a prisoner once again, just as he had been as a boy.
So how does a 15th century Wallachian prince become the world's most famous vampire? It starts with a name. Vlad's father was a member of the Order of the Dragon, a chivalric order founded by Holy Roman Emperor Sigismund. His father's nickname was Vlad Dracula. Dracul in Romanian means both dragon and devil. His son, Vlad III, became Vlad Dracula, son of the dragon, son of the devil. The German pamphlets spread his story across Europe. Stories of a prince who drank the blood of his enemies. Stories of a man who was somehow unkillable, who returned from captivity again and again to reclaim his throne. Centuries pass. The stories mutate. And in 1890, an Irish author named Bram Stoker is researching Eastern European folklore in the British Museum. He finds references to Vlad Dracula. He reads about Transylvania. He reads about a warrior prince who seemed to defy death. Stoker's original notes show his vampire was initially named Count Dracula. Then he read about Vlad, and he had his title, Dracula.
The historical Vlad almost certainly did not live in Transylvania. He ruled Wallachia to the south. He almost certainly did not drink blood in the literal sense. But the psychological truth Stoker captured was real. Here was a man who fed on suffering, who built his power on the fear of death, who seemed, against all historical probability, to keep coming back. He retook his throne in 1476, only to be killed in battle, probably in December of that same year. Some accounts say his own men may have turned on him. His head reportedly was sent to Constantinople, where Mehmed displayed it to prove the great prince was finally, truly dead. It didn't stop the stories. The honest answer is that the real Vlad Dracula was something more disturbing than a vampire. A vampire is a supernatural monster. It has no choice. It acts on instinct. Vlad chose every stake. He calculated every impalement. He understood exactly what he was doing and why. He was a product of the most brutal political environment imaginable. A man who learned, as an 11-year-old hostage, that the world runs on power and terror. And he decided to become the most terrifying thing in that world. Did it work? For a time, yes. Wallachia remained independent. The Ottomans didn't absorb it during his reign. The forest of the Impaled stopped Mehmed II in his tracks. But history's verdict is complicated. The man who saved Wallachia through terror also prevented it from building the kind of stable alliances that might have protected it longer. He was a weapon, brilliant, devastating, and ultimately self-consuming. Bram Stoker understood something. The most terrifying monsters aren't supernatural. They're human. They have histories. They have reasons. They were once children. Vlad Dracula was once an 11-year-old boy, sitting in an Ottoman fortress, wondering if his father would ever come for him. He didn't. And from that wound, the most feared man in 15th century Europe was born. If you made it this far, thank you. If this story hit different, share it.
Drop your thoughts below. I read every comment. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. Real history is darker, stranger, and more human than any fiction. I'm Red, and I'll see you in the next one.